and basically do the Vatican's job in trying to frame the connection between UAP and religious phenomena throughout the centuries in terms that portray these entities as beneficent. Okay, so if you read American Cosmic, as I was very disturbed to find when I read it, there are whole portions of that book that basically draw from my argument in Prometheus and Atlas. And two of the people who were her leading advisors in writing that book, Jeffrey Kripal and Jacques Vallée, were people I was closely involved with, especially Kripal, who was basically on the committee for my dissertation when I first drafted Prometheus and Atlas. And whole portions of her book having to do with Heidegger, technology, and mythology, and especially the myth of Prometheus, are strikingly similar to Prometheus and Atlas, which was published years before. But the whole thing has been spun into a narrative that serves the interests of the Vatican. And she's been granted access to the Vatican Library, the secret Vatican libraries. Wow. And she spins it all so as to make these entities out to be angels. And remember, Grusch said it was the Vatican who told the Americans about the craft that crashed in Italy in 1933, so that we could then go scoop it up in 1945. So what's my point? My point is that,
and also real quick, it is interesting that the Pope does come out and say, if we find out that aliens exist, we're not going to, we're fine. We accept this. This falls fine. Like our theology won't be changed.
Worse than that.
Okay.
Monsignor Balducci came out, I don't know, was it 5-6 years ago, and he said, these entities are like us. They're not just our brothers. They're like us, but they have never sinned. Christ didn't need to come to them because they've never sinned. They're sinless humans.
Wow. Jason, I've had so many tradcaths and orthobros tell me the exact same thing when I ask them, like, hey, guys, what about the existence of all these other planets? Right. That's what they say. I personally find it to be kind of ridiculous. I don't know.
Well, it's appalling. And so my point is that the soft disclosure people are going to use agents like Pasulka to even maneuver around the most uncomfortable dimensions of the intersection between ufology and theology. Once they start to get into anthropological studies, right, and archaeological studies of the impact of this phenomenon on human history. So this is their plan, okay? So they represent a third faction. You've got the Majestic group, the Collins elite, and these soft disclosure people. Now, here's what I know from my sources. Grusch was not authorized by any of these people. So the obviously those who want to keep the phenomenon a secret in perpetuity, namely the Collins elite and the old guard, let's say Majestic 12, okay, to use the popular name for it. Obviously, they didn't want him coming forward. And that's why he couldn't get this published in the New York Times or the Washington Post. That's why his interview was taken off of YouTube within a few hours. That's why he couldn't get a major media outlet to run it and had to go with News Nation, right? And so clearly they don't want and these are the people who intimidated him. He filed his complaint with the Inspector General because they were threatening him while he was investigating as a congressionally authorized member of the UAP task force, right? Okay, so they don't want this out. The soft disclosure people were also aggravated to see Grusch's testimony. From what I have heard, the soft disclosure people have a plan for certain information to be made public between now and Thanksgiving. Between now and November, they want to roll out certain information that fits the timetable that I laid out for you earlier, right? Of these successive stages of disclosure. Fake disclosure. Disclosure that, consists of lies of omission that are of such a scale that it might as well be deception rather than disclosure, right? And so these soft disclosure people were actually quite aggravated with Grusch coming forward. and they're afraid that it's going to basically throw a monkey wrench in their own plans for their own phased so-called disclosure.
It's almost like, by the way, the Trickster was the one who ended up throwing the monkey wrench through the process of having somebody like Grusch come forward.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Okay, I don't want to, I want to try to be as pragmatic about how we analyze this as possible. But that is certainly, it can't be discounted that there are other deeper forces at play here. Okay, but if we look at it from a practical standpoint, let's just contemplate this for a minute. So, who are these sources giving Grusch all this information? He got the names of individuals running these projects. He got the project names, and you need these code names in order to investigate these things. If Congress is going to go start banging on doors, Senate Intelligence Committee wants to go pursue this, they need code names. He gave them that. And he gave them the locations where these objects are being held. And by the way, look, I'm partly, how can I put it, devoting such attention to this disclosure and passionately doing what I can to support this man's testimony, because I know from my own experience that some of the things he's saying are true. I know a person who has been at one of these facilities and has handled some of this wreckage. And in particular, this individual was there to help them figure out the guidance system for these vehicles. And he described this facility, and it's exactly the kind of thing that Grusch is talking about. These places where basically, you go into what looks like a small warehouse, and the whole floor drops, and it turns out to be an elevator and takes you into a deep subterranean facility carved out of rock. And they have research and development laboratories down there where recovered vehicles are being studied, and where reverse engineering enterprises are operational. So anyway, look, but who informed him of these things, right? I mean, it wasn't one or two people. He got extensive information from a number of sources, to the point where he was able to deliver 11 hours of testimony to Congress under oath. It must mean that there is a rift even within the group that has, over the decades, been adamantly opposed to disclosure. It must mean that within the group that I call the old guard, there's a factionalization taking place. And I've heard rumors of this throughout the years, that the younger people in that group don't know whether they want to go down with the ship, that, they are increasingly convinced that the United States is facing an existential crisis. I've spoken to a number of people in military and intelligence who agree with my analysis of this, that the United States is facing a collapse that could potentially be worse than that of the USSR over the next few years, not far from now. And under those conditions, where the United States were to disintegrate the way the USSR did, there's an incredibly serious danger for those who've been involved with these programs, that they would be exposed, because large, numbers of individuals who worked in these programs will be suddenly released from their security oaths, since the federal government to which they took an oath no longer exists. And then they would be prosecuted either by the various countries that are successors to the United States, the California Republic, the Republic of Cascadia, whatever, the new Confederacy, etc., either by these successors to the United States or fragments of the former